All right. So those league stats are really, really impressive from just last month. And that 722 riders, I think, Shell, if you are on this call, you might be able to give us some context on how much further ahead we are than we were at this point last season.
I meant to look yesterday, but I failed to do so. I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness, your data nerd crown is being revoked for this month, but you'll get it back next time, I believe. All right. Important dates that we've got coming up. So they're all in January. So we've got beginning of the regular season happened last weekend, which is awesome. And then we are at January 19th, which is the deadline for student athlete category change petitions. And not as a total category, but as far as that's the last time that you can put one in, and the student athlete will be guaranteed to have a custom race plate with their correct category and their name. Any of the student athlete category change petitions that we get after that date will still consider the change request, but they just won't get the custom plate with their name on it. That's the big caveat with that. And then January 21st is the last date for regular registration for student athletes. And February 23rd is going to be the cutoff for late registration. And late registration is going to begin right at the beginning of January 22nd and last through February 23rd. And it's an additional $10 fee that will be incurred for student athletes trying to register then. A couple of caveats for that. This does not mean that student athletes can be participating with your team and then have to give their fees in by the 21st. Remember that a student athlete or a coach, an adult, can only participate with your team one time on a waiver, and that's ever. So it's not like you can do one time on a waiver per season. It's one time on a waiver ever. And if you have a student athlete who's returning to you, they have to be a fully registered student athlete before they can participate in any of your team activities. If are there any questions on that or any need for clarification on that? All right. With that being said, then we'll kind of go ahead and move into our topics for this evening. First one is going to be adventure passport distribution. And I'm going to kind of give the TLDR version of this. And then if there are any questions or concerns, we've got Shell who can then address these. But the big thing is that we are waiting for student athlete registration to end, that first period for the regular registration. So that January 21st date. After that, we'll know how many passports need to be mailed to your team. And Shell has already kind of pre-positioned these in key areas. Is that correct, Shell?
Yes.
Would you care to expand upon that any?
I think you nailed it. Other than we've got every team assigned to one of the people that already has passports, and is waiting to know how many to give to each team. So as soon as that deadline comes, they should get distributed to every team pretty quickly.
And so until you get the passport for your student athletes, what you can do is there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can print out one of the copies of the passport that is available online, and then keep track of the student athletes that have earned different badges or have completed different tasks. The other is to utilize TeamSnap, and you can actually create these kind of checklist items in TeamSnap. And then you would just be able to check off which student athletes that would apply to. And then whenever you get those adventure passports for them, you would be able to bulk kind of sign off on all of the ones for all the student athletes. And then they would be able to get them stamped and earn their badges and those sorts of things. And the other kind of piece to this is the adventure passport is one set of badges, but there are other sets of badges that can be earned by student athletes for doing other things, not just the adventure passport stuff. And so kind of manage to keep track of all of those. And then once the student athletes have their number plates, they'll be able to affix those stickers to their number plates, and there's space on the number plates that is specific for allowing them to put those stickers and badges on there for the season. Are there any questions or needs for clarification on adventure passport distribution, badges, or anything of that nature?
I'm sorry, this is Dave McBride. How is Team Snap going to be used with the adventure passports?
So that would be up to each individual team. So what you do is you can go in and create checklist items. You can do this for like basic skills. So as you get a new rider in, you would be able to check them off whenever you have seen them demonstrate a skill correctly. You can also create something like these different tasks that are in the adventure passport, and then you would be able to check them off as they complete them, so that whenever they get their adventure passport in hand, you'd be able to quickly sign off. You would have a record of who did what, and that way it would kind of ease your ability to keep track of a bunch of different student athletes, so that you weren't having to worry about having something in hand for them to register on. So once they get their adventure passport, you'd just be able to sign off on those things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, there's a lot of functionality in Team Snap for you to explore. And that's one thing, like you can, if you have team dues, like I've done that, where you create where team dues, and then as people pay, you're like checking them off so that you can see like who's paid and who hasn't, and that sort of thing. There's all kinds of things that you can do with it. Any other questions or needs for clarification on adventure passport distribution? Excellent. Then that brings us to winter weather guidelines. And this was one of those things where one of you all emailed me for some guidance on winter weather. And this is an area where NICA previously had very specific criteria, and they have rewritten things and made them much more vague. And so the guidelines that we always have used have previously been something that was a document that we could point you to for NICA, but now there isn't anything. And so we're actually working on this document. And I'm going to let Brian speak to this because he's been busy at work today with his artificial intelligence partner to develop this. And Brian, if you would like to speak to that.
Oh my goodness, I almost feel like Shell right now. Like, oh, I'm not quite prepared to talk about it. So I guess how I would start is, like Sean described, if you're a coach and you have some cold weather coming up and you go into PitZone, you go to coach's resources and you look for the NICA weather event guide and you click on cold weather, it basically tells you nothing. It tells you it's up to the state to define what the policy is. Well, that was interesting to find out yesterday, Sean. So thanks for the heads up for that. So very quickly today, I put together a North Carolina policy that generally follows the NICA weather guide structure. And what I mean by that, I believe most coaches that have been doing this for a while are familiar with the green, yellow, orange, and red construct. Green, hey, you're good. Still pay attention based on the weather condition. Yellow, okay, a little more concerned. You might have to modify some things, all the way up to red, like, hey, you're probably canceling your practice or an event. So very quickly, I put together some guidance for cold weather that indicates temperature thresholds, including wind chill, and gives you all guidance for what to consider to either modify or cancel your practice along those temperature thresholds. It's something at least that is a guide rail for you to consider in hosting your practices over the next couple months, because I know in parts of the state, it's going to get pretty cold. Sean, is that fair? And I'm pretty comfortable if we want to shoot that out to folks to take a look at. I think it's in a good place because we did a pretty quick staff turn on it today with it. I think it's okay to use at this point.
Yes, and I can certainly link to that in this document a little bit later. So if you want to refer back to this, and I'll have a link to that guidelines that we're sort of workshopping as we speak. And one of the things I think is really important to point out is that it's questions like these that you all are bringing up that is allowing us to kind of realize that sort of we've been unaware, like NICA doesn't go, hey, we just revamped all these guidelines and made them really vague and it's now up to you. Like, we don't know that until someone says, can you point me to where this is in writing? And then we start finding that, like, oh, it's not in writing anymore. So now we've got to create that sort of guidance on our own. It's not something that we've been made aware of. So we're making these adjustments as we find them out. So please keep those questions coming. They're really good and we appreciate them. I'm seeing a couple of questions coming through in chat. Any idea why NICA National did away with the specific guidelines?
I'm happy to address that one, Sean.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, it just happened to coincide with Amanda Carey's biweekly office hours. Amanda Carey's the NICA president. So I dialed in like I normally do. And I told her exactly what we were working through today in terms of, we discovered a policy gap. We're trying to close the policy gap because it mitigates risk. What Amanda shared was, it's just too hard for NICA to deal with cold weather policy for the multitude of states they deal with. If you're Idaho versus Florida, it was just too hard for them to come up with a standard cold weather policy for that. So they just left it up to the state leagues. Awesome. I love policy flexibility, but it's always good to be aware when you need to establish some policy guidelines. So thanks for whatever coach that was, Sean, that bubbled that up exactly right. In my favorite new book. So if everyone wants a good holiday read, and this is the danger of giving me the microphone, Sean, if everyone wants a good holiday read, Wiring the Winning Organization by Gene Kim and Steven Sphere talks about three kind of pillars of a really effective organization. Slowification, so slow down, understand, like make sure your folks understand kind of what they're doing, their task is. Simplification, simplify it for the entire organization to help that person with that task. And then amplification, that's the key. Can issues get bubbled up so folks across the organization can take care of it? And that's what happened in this case. A coach bubbled up, hey, there's an issue here, and we took a staff turn on it today to quote unquote help that problem along. Sean, if you can post the policy and the answer, Dave Larkins, I'll throw that on the website for people to see because I'm pretty comfortable with it. I'll put it on the coach resource page. Let us know if something is unclear, or hey, really hard for us to do out here in Boone because it's freezing all the time in the winter. But yeah, just let us know.
Yeah, I was going to speak to that. We will put that up in the coaches resources, and there is a thing in there right now that's like weather guidelines. And if you go into it, it's a NICA document, and it's very broad and vague. So this will be much more specific. So can't National do better about letting us know when changes take place? It's really not. I think it's, there's a lot of things coming, and we discover things kind of as we dig through and find that there's a policy gap and we start working on it. It's just going to happen. I think it's a big organization, and it's not a clear channel of how these things would get distributed. But we will always do our best. So bring those questions to us and we will do everything we can. If there's not a guideline, then we're going to work on making a guideline so that you have clear guidance and have something to point to. I think that's the biggest thing, is when you're dealing with student athletes or parents, you want to have like, here's the guidelines in black and white. Like, here's what we're following. This is not me just saying like, hey, I feel chilly and don't want to have practice tonight, so that you've got some guidance on that. And that's really, we feel like it's really important so that it's kind of across the board. And one of the other things about the guidelines that have been written is saying sort of like, here's the floors, like, here's as low a temperature as you can go for these kind of various scenarios. But as a coach, you could certainly set them as higher. So like 40 degrees being kind of the floor, for example, you could certainly go like, well, for my student athletes, like 50 is really about the minimum that they feel comfortable. It brings up, there's a great movie from the 80s called LA Story, and it's set in Los Angeles, and Steve Martin is a weatherman, and he's going around interviewing all these people in LA about this big cold snap they have. And he's like, what did you do when the temperature got below 60 degrees last night? And, they're just like, oh, we just locked all the doors and lit a fire in the fireplace. So everyone's perception of cold is different given their climate. And so I think that's what NICA kind of set out to do, was just go like, the states really need to decide this because the states have a better idea of what's appropriate for them. when we went to Idaho for the national summit in July, it dumped snow on us. Like it was snowing actively very hard the morning that we were supposed to go out and do a ride. So, freak weather can happen, but that weather is kind of expected in some places. So I think this is a good call on their part to just go, let's let the states come up with these policies. All right. Any other questions or concerns about that? Excellent. Another question that came through on the chat is about catting down. There are no specific guidelines on catting down, and it's one thing that, like, we've been looking. That's primarily the petitions that we've been looking at have been catting down, not catting up, and so we want you to put those in. Give us reasons, like give us some understanding of the student athlete, kind of where they're at, what they're thinking. We have these guidelines, but when we look at them and kind of look at your scenario, we certainly are taking that into account and going, it would be more appropriate for this student athlete to cat down. One of the things that I want you to kind of consider is the idea about like goal setting and how you can frame that stretch goal. Maybe a student athlete wants to be in a more competitive category. They want to cat down to be more competitive. And that certainly has its place. But if they were, fairly competitive, but you can see them really training and getting better, maybe staying in a category that they maybe feel like they're just sort of on the outside edge of doing well, but that gives them that stretch goal to do better, that might be a good place for them. But that's where your relationship with your student athlete really comes into play, and being able to express like what's in their best interest is really key. So by all means, we don't have a hard and fast guideline on when to cat up, when to cat down, but put that stuff in there. Go ahead and fill those petitions out, and we will take a look at them as a committee, and everybody will put in kind of their take on the reasoning behind it and what they think should happen. And then we kind of come to a group consensus on it. So by all means, whatever petition direction you want to go in, please put those in sooner than later so that we don't get flooded kind of in that last week or so before we have to put everything together to make sure that we get those number plates out correctly. And then other things to consider, that Ben Reed said that some school teams, the school districts might have weather policies that you need to be aware of, so that you're kind of following those if you're tightly aligned with a school. That's something for you to consider as well. So it might be worth kind of a look at what a particular school does if you're associated with that school. All right. Last topic that I have for you tonight is PitZone maintenance, my favorite. Please, 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 please deactivate. You may be holding out hope. I've got one student athlete that I'm holding out hope on, but once January 21st comes, deactivate. It throws our numbers off. It's very weird when we go into PitZone. We can't always trust some of the numbers that it's giving us, because it's counting kind of everybody in your PitZone, whether they've registered or not, whether they're like truly active or just sitting there on your PitZone not being deactivated. Deactivate is the only way to get them to not count. So kind of be aware of that. And remember that it's a super easy, just email to me like, hey, I need you to reactivate this kid. And I can go in there really quickly and do it for you. No problem. I'd much rather reactivate them than have you sitting on, 10, 20. I've seen more than 20 student athletes that were all like not active in someone's dashboard and kind of taking up space. Like you had to scroll through trying to find what kids actually had registered. So just for your own ease of use and peace of mind, like deactivate everybody that you just, you're holding out hope, but it's not looking likely. and then we can reactivate them if they do come around. Any questions or needs for clarification on that?
I've got one quick question.
Sure.
I have a student that I believe changed teams. They're showing unregistered in my PitZone before I deactivated them. I just wanted to get clarification on that, if they already have a profile or if there's anything else I should do or just deactivate them.
Email me that student's name and
Okay.
And then I'm going to take a look, because we shouldn't be, the only time we're issuing an invitation to a student is when they're brand new to the league. When they go to another team,
Yeah.
we move their profile to the new teams, because that
Yeah,
way
I'm thinking
they've
that
got
didn't
all
happen.
that race stuff. So yeah.
Yep.
And the more of you that can sort of communicate that, the better, because not everyone hears it. And inevitably I get, multiple times per each season, like, I don't think I was supposed to invite this kid. You never invite them if they're sitting on another team. Like, we just move them over, and that way all of their race data transfers with them and they have a history. So that will help with category placement and all that kind of stuff. PitZone's really dumb. If you send a new invitation to a kid, it just thinks there's two kids that happen to have the exact same name and exact same address, but they're two different people. So just email me that one and I will look them up and see what needs to be done.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And then we are making a big push to add more content to our YouTube channel. And we'd really like to get everyone to subscribe. So here's a video that we shot on our preseason adventure event. We are trying to include a lot more sort of video from the field in these things. So it's kind of basically our podcast, but then with a lot more video content to it on our YouTube channel. We'll also be adding some other things that aren't just our podcast and aren't just coaches calls and things like that. And the more subscribers we have, the more you'll get to know what's coming on there, but also we'll just be able to get sort of a bigger platform for spreading the word about our league and help us kind of spread the word about things to grow the league itself, but also grow your teams as we get a little bit more visibility on this kind of big platform. So there's a link there to the latest video about our adventure event at Browns Creek. And if you want to click that, but by all means, spread the word amongst your coaches, your parents, your student athletes. The more subscribers we can get, the better. Like, I'd love to see us get the 500 subscriber mark this season. That would be great. And we're going to be working really hard to provide a lot more content there from our events and all those sorts of things. So please take a look at that. And we really appreciate your support on that. Are there any other questions or topics that anyone would like to bring up this evening? Question: is there a specific reason why a level 3 coach is not considered appropriate for running a practice without a head coach being there? If level 3 is not suitable, what differentiates them from level 2? Level 3s are head coach eligible. They just need to be designated as the head coach in PitZone. That's why we've asked everyone to come up with the primary head coach and the secondary head coach. The role of head coach is more than just being a level 3 coach. It's all about planning. It's all about overseeing, oversight, and accountability. And so it's important that we have that one person on a team that is sort of running the show. That's the person that we know knows all the pieces that are in play, knows everything that's going on. If we were to have a team of 10 level 3s and it just happened to be whoever showed up to practice that day was the one running it, that's not a great accountability model. And so we do need that one specific head coach. There's the primary head coach who is accountable and is the one main person who is consistently at practice. But in the event that they can't be at practice, then there is that secondary designated head coach who is also a level 3 who can step in and take their place. And so that's what we're looking for. Does that sort of clear that up, or do you have further questions about that? Still leaves the question of why be level 3 without aspirations to be a head coach? I'm not sure what you're asking. Yeah, if you don't want to be a head coach, there isn't really a need for you to be level 3.
Okay, that was my question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm getting over the flu. So if I get uncontrollable coughing, that's why I was trying to do text. But
No problem.
basically, I'm just concerned is it doesn't really leave a difference between the 2 and 3 spot. I mean, Trek thinks an awful lot of the level 3 program, enough that they said, they'll send you a helmet, free helmet. I just don't see why you would push to have all these level 3 coaches like we did last year. And then obviously you don't want but 2 head coaches. We said it a couple meetings back. Why would you push to have level 3 coaches and not have aspirations to be a head coach?
So level 3 is the difference between a level 2 and a level 3 is the WFA requirement for first aid. And then there's additional training as well as an attendance at the Leaders Summit, which is an online 5-night training that NICA National does. And that's specific to training people to be head coaches. As far as why you would be level 3 and not want to be a head coach, some people just like to kind of move up the ladder and have that experience. The other is that as a level 2 and a level 3, you're still needing to get those continuing education units, those CEUs. And one way to do that is Leader Summit. One way to do that is these more advanced training. So it's something that some people do just because they need CEUs. The other is that we want to develop these succession plans. So like I am going into my 8th season as the head coach of my team. I have been working to develop a person to take over the head coach role with me. And it usually takes me about 2 seasons to get a coach, identify them, and then get them to the level of being a level 3 and ready to take over for me. And it's at that point that I get an email saying that they've gotten a new job and are no longer able to devote their time to NICA. So I kind of have to start over again. If you have multiple level 3 head coaches, then you have multiple people who can then sort of like pass the baton. It's also, as we shift from being large composite teams to school-based teams, it's a way of kind of shifting that person over to now you have a school-based team that you're taking over and becoming the head coach of. So there's a lot of scenarios where having multiple level 3s is a good thing for those succession and growth plans. If you have no desire to be a head coach, then, you can certainly support your team as a level 2 coach. That's a great place to be. Like level 2 is that great, can lead rides, can do lots of things, but just doesn't take on the mantle of responsibility of running a team. And so level 2s are incredibly vital. Probably the most important person on the team other than just that head coach. Like those level 2s serve huge roles within their teams without taking on that leadership role. So Ben, I'm going to have you reach out to Brian on that because we talked about that topic last coaches call. And so if you want to reach out to him and discuss that with him, he can answer you further on that.
And I'm happy to give a quick verbal on it, Sean,
Okay.
again, for the benefit of everyone. There's two aspects to it. We are trying to provide more opportunities for all of our athletes at our league events because we have kids like Eli Novak from McDougal Middle who shows up to our preseason adventure event and says the best part of his day was the Teen Trail Corps activity. And so I'm not sure exactly what Teen Trail Corps activities we'll have at all our events this season, but that committee is working hard on that to give more opportunities to our kids. So we will have more programming for our student athletes at our league events, and we're just going to apply one charge to all. No matter what you're doing, you're coming to do that. The other is basically a fiscal reality. The Porta Johns cost the same, whether you're racing or not. The vendors, the venue cost, it costs the same, whether you're coming or not. So those are the two aspects of it. Provide more, and really the costs are applicable to anyone who's coming to use the venue, so to speak, per day. But yeah, Ben, if you want to have a one-on-one, happy to do that with you and talk through that rationale. And if you're getting questions from your parents and your coaches and the like, I did update that policy on the registration portion of the webpage, just so folks are clear that it is a one fee for the weekend type of approach this season. But thanks for the question, Ben. Appreciate it.
All right. Other topics? I'm sitting here watching our chat. This has been the most active chat that I've seen in a while. So by all means, hit us up in chat, or you can unmute and ask a question. That would be great. Oh, the Fletcher venue. Okay. So I've got a big scoop for you. It's actually not in Fletcher. We've been in talks with Aaron Gwynn since he bought Windrock. And so the first NICA Enduro will be at Windrock. So yeah, that's the scoop on that.
So now YouTube will flag us for disinformation. Sean, great. this will come down to me. So much for the YouTube push.
Yeah, we're just gonna do downhill and enduro. That's it. Okay, so strike that. None of that was real. I think we had a moment when there wasn't a risk management person at NICA National that we could have maybe snuck that by, but they hired somebody. So I think we're we're not going to be doing that. All right. Any other questions or topics? We are actually, so to be serious about Fletcher, we are actually working on kind of figuring out when we'll be able to do sort of a preview, pre-ride, that sort of thing with the landowner. So we're having to be very tight-lipped about it, simply because it is private land. It's someone very generously who is building trail and is actually sort of building trail that's going to be suitable for us. I think that's awesome, but we just want to be very, very, very conscious of that relationship and make sure that we can develop a long-lasting relationship through one of mutual respect. And we are going to work on that. And I know, Brian, you are working on that kind of as we speak, so that we can get something out there as soon as possible.
Yep, I've had a couple back and forths with the owner over the past 2 weeks. I think coming out of the new year, we'll be able to provide folks a general location for where that is. And just like you said, Sean, we'll work to open that up some weekend prior to that event weekend, so folks can get some preview if they feel like making the trip out there at Fletcher to get their riders on the course. That's what we're working towards.
Awesome. All right. Other questions or topics that anyone would like to bring up? All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate it. And as always, if you have any questions, need any clarification or anything like that, by all means, email me and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. All right. Hope everyone has a good night and we will talk soon. Sean Gentry, if you don't mind staying on the line, I'd like to address your email that I've been remiss in getting back to you on.
Okay, cool.
Sean, do you need me for that? Sean Moore, that is, or?
No,
Okay.
you can go.